Okay, I'll call the meeting of Community and Protective Services Committee to order. I would like to say the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Reminder to colleagues to log into eScribe if you haven't already. I'll look for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, I don't see any in the chambers. I don't see any on the Zoom. Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda. Scheduled items, which there are none. That brings us to the consent agenda. Any items that colleagues would like to pull for a further discussion? Councillor Kaibaga. You just need to unmute.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure if we can pull 2.3. Actually, let's pull 2.3. I have questions that could generate into a change of motion. So if we could pull it, would be great.
Okay, any other items? Mayor Holder? You'll need to unmute as well.
I'm looking at 2.6. I think I can cover that in the consent with a couple of comments I've got.
Okay, that sounds like a motion for everything other than 2.3. Is there a seconder for that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think 2.2 should be pulled, and with your indulgence, I might suggest that we move that to the end of the agenda, just in case there's any, I don't know whether there would be or not, but there might be some matters that we might need to take in camera as it pertains to client solicitor privilege.
Okay, so let's get 2.2 out of there as well. And we'll have the mayor moving the remainder of the items. And then I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Kaibaga, thank you. And then we'll get into discussion on those items. This, just to be clear, includes 2.1, the report from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, 2.4, the RFP on resting spaces, the second one, 2.5, the transitional modular housing update, 2.6 and 2.7 as well. Any discussion on those items? If not, I just wanted to say on the resting spaces in particular, wonderful to see this initiative moving ahead. I think it's much needed and on top of what was dealt with just recently in terms of the winter response. Kudos to Mr. Cooper and his team who are working on getting those resting spaces up and running. I think it's very promising development, and I know it's part of the core area action plan, and it's good to see that moving ahead. Similarly, the transitional and modular housing update, very good news. Be exciting to see if this can happen relatively quickly here in our community and get that going and get some new housing units being built relatively fast. Mayor Holder, I wonder if you wanted to say anything about Sylvan Street and the stabilization space. I know you flagged that as something you wanted to speak to.
Yes, I do, Chair. Just bear with me. I'm going to get it up here.
Sure. I see Councillor Kaibaga. I'll go to her and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Councillor Kaibaga.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo your comments. Just want to thank staff for the work that they did on this. And it is, we know that this is very needed, and I'm just excited to see this move forward as we continue to work on our efforts to provide opportunities for housing for people in the City of London.
Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. On 2.6, to Mr. Cooper, if I can, as we all know, this was the one of the important pieces of the core area action plan, and I certainly support the direction associated with the housing, the affordable housing that will be there. But if I could ask you, through you, Chair, to Mr. Cooper, I presume, in terms of the impact that this might have on our core area action plan, knowing that we were looking for this as resting places with certain services and the like. I wonder if you could share with us any thoughts you might have about any impacts that this might have on the corridor action plan, please.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. And yes, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, it doesn't really impact our plans with the stabilization space broadly. I would suggest that the work that my team and myself have been doing on the stabilization spaces is more looking at a citywide response. I know the Sylvan Street site was purchased for that intent, and we are continuing to do some work there. And part of what we're asking for is to continue doing some of that work, but also looking at things a little bit broader and looking at opportunities a little bit broader. The stabilization response was always a multi-space response. It wasn't all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. So I think what this continued dialogue will allow us to do is continue the work that my team is already doing during the pandemic and look at alternative spaces and additional spaces that can be operationalized with the appropriate operational and operating funding.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to echo Councillor Helmer's comments with respect to the kudos, because I do think it's important that we acknowledge your efforts in moving this along. This is truly, truly important. I would add that I think one of the challenges that we all have as we look for appropriate affordable housing space is land. And the city has some. I'm not referencing industrial lands, but the potential for land. And this is certainly an acknowledgement that this is land that's available and has better use. And that's certainly the spirit that I know you're taking with that. I've had discussions with the province today, and I'm looking to have an extremely comprehensive list of any provincial lands that are not currently allocated that we might be able to pursue more discussion around this, and as well with the federal government. So stay tuned. I look forward to us all as council working with you to do this. And thanks to your team for putting this priority in place.
Any further discussion, colleagues? If not, let's open up the vote on those consent items.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lewis suggested moving 2.2 to the end of the meeting. I'm happy to do that unless there's any objections from members of the committee. I don't see any. Okay, that's fine. Takes us to 2.3. This was pulled by Councillor Kaibaga for further discussion. This is the resting spaces for Indigenous people who are experiencing homelessness. Councillor Kaibaga.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to first thank staff for the work that they've done on this. And I just had a few questions on the terms of the funding. So it says that it's 1-year terms, and the date of for the period. I'm just curious to know why such a short term, and the disruption that may happen with the organization when we have too many short terms, and if I could also get an idea of how long the city has been in partnership with Atlosa, and if we could comment on that, basically. So just want to know how long we've been in partnership with them and why the 1-year term.
Who would like to handle that?
Thank you. And through the chair, I can answer that question. Thank you, Councillor Kaibaga, for the question. First off, homeless prevention team, and I'd say the city in general, has been working in partnership with LOSA for a number of years. When I look back at some of the information from my department, it's in excess of 3+ years. Funding started with that organization with drop-in centers. And then as we've evolved to look at some of the more challenging folks that we see in our community, Atlosa was one of the agencies, in addition to London Cares, to step forward to undertake the pilot project of the enhanced crash beds after the LIN funding had ended on that program when I first started with the city. So they've worked with the city on that pilot program, which came to fruition through the Core Area Action Plan. This RFP was utilizing the multi-year budget commitment the council had made for additional funds through the additional case management item for resting spaces. And so although it's multi-year budget funding over 3 years, as we realized the allocation for this agency, that 25% or $250,000 would not address the entire cost of the program. And so because we don't have a budget allocated every year over the 3 years for that program, we have to do the 1-year terms of the contract. So we are looking at sources of funding to guarantee the funding beyond the 1-year term. We have the base $250,000, and we'll be looking to work with Atlosa as well as our provincial and federal partners and any necessary municipal contributions or requests through working with finance to make sure that the program is a little more sustainable and more sustainable than well, just I guess long-term sustainability, I guess is the best term.
Okay, and so basically, through you, Mr. Chair, again, thank you, Mr. Cooper, for those comments. It sounds like it's a funding issue that's causing us to have to do the 1-year renewal terms. The source of funding, basically.
Correct. And through the chair, what we're looking at is we have the multi-year budget funding that was committed by council for the resting spaces, and it was $25,000 per space. Atlosa operating 10 beds would be $250,000. To operate 10 beds, we knew it was going to be an additional funding for that. As we visit and look at our provincial and federal allocations, the additional one-time allocations we've had with the pandemic, as well as what future funding may look like, we would then be looking at reallocating or allocating certain portions of that provincial and federal funding to make up the gap of operating the program.
So, and the reason why I asked this through you again, Mr. Chair, is that I have had this discussion with lots of different service providers in this specific field, and it is disruptive when the funding has to be renewed every year, and it doesn't give them the opportunity to sustain staff, especially during the pandemic. It was a very difficult situation for them to have staff that they can sustain, and also to have that promise that they can still take in people when they're still in that, the period of waiting to get funding again is a very challenging for them, because they have to either let go staff or tell community members that they can't receive them in that space. And I'm just wondering, since it's a 3-year funding that we did allocate through the multi-year budget, if there's a way to switch the 1-year term, or if the restrictions around the 1-year term could be lessened, because they do have to write reports all over again every year to provide to City Council, while they're short on staff and high numbers of people who need this space. And from my experience, from my conversations with them, is that it's a very challenging situation for them to be in. And I think that if there's something that we can do to work with them to make it less challenging, we should take those avenues. So I do want to support this, but I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can figure out in the terms of reference how this can be less challenging, and they don't have to lose staff and rehire staff and write these very challenging reports that they don't even have enough staff to be able to do that, and also not lose the people that they're already serving, because we do know that there's a higher number of Indigenous people who are homeless in our communities. So we want to make sure that this partnership is working well, and we're addressing some of the issues that this specific organization has mentioned to be a huge challenge for them and a barrier for them. That was a question.
Okay, thank you. It was a number of questions. So I will totally agree with you 110% around the funding challenges that we work within. Our allocations for the provincial and federal governments are on generally 3-year terms, and we're coming to the end of that 3-year term with our CHIPPY funding, and we have a couple years left on our Reaching Home funding. So we're in the same boat, I would say, as many of our organizations around the guaranteed long-term funding. It's something I know we advocate quite regularly for the province and the federal government's for. It would be great to be able to give our agencies that we work with that assurance and that consistency. It's something we strive to do. I would also suggest that with this specific RFP, what we did look at is we did look at the approval for a 3-year term, 1 year initially, and then 2-year extensions. And those 2-year extensions would not require the agency to reapply for the program at all. What it would ask is that they just resubmit a budget. And so what we would look for is you have a base set funding of that $250,000 for the next 3 years, and then we're trying to piecemeal a little bit of that additional funding beyond the next couple of years to make the program whole, so to speak. And so that's some of the balance that unfortunately we have to do in this sector. And as we look to re-identify priorities, we look like we're dealing with 18% of our homeless population as identifying as Indigenous. We recognize that as a challenge. We recognize there's specific programs that need to be created and worked on to support Indigenous folks. And that's the work we're doing with ATLOSA day in and day out. And it is some of the work that we'll see from some future reports that will be looking to support the implementation of the Giwatashkad plan, which is the Indigenous homelessness strategy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you again for letting me continue on this. I just want to make sure then if we don't change the 1-year terms, could there still be a possibility for Mr. Craig's Cooper's office to work with ATLOSA to reduce the barriers?
Thank you. And through the chair, I would say we have been trying to work with this agency as well as others to reduce barriers. We have specific reporting requirements with the provincial and federal governments as our funders to obtain their funding. So there are specific reporting requirements and I would say investment plan requirements that we do have to submit. We try to reduce the administrative burden on our agencies as much as we can. We recognize a lot of agencies aren't staffed or, to do reports and to do some of the necessary information that we get. So we do work quite closely with all of our agencies, but we do require budget submissions and some other minimum standards. And so we do work with our agencies to best meet their needs and to best make sure that we're still addressing the requirements of the provincial and federal government. So I can commit that we will continue to work with this agency as well as our other agencies to make sure that we are reducing administrative burden.
Thank you. Sorry, this is my last comment, I promise. I think one of the things that perhaps Councillor Helmer can remember us having this discussion around the ways that the system can be different for different people. And one of the reasons why we actually moved an anti-racism lens across all service areas in the City of London. This is a great example as to where we can go the extra mile to make sure that we are proportionately responding to the disproportionate needs from different communities that have different barriers, and we're addressing those barriers. And I've talked about this before, specifically to organizations that service communities of color, to make sure that we are adjusting the red tapes to match. So I look forward to seeing how this is going to be addressed, and I do trust that that's going to be done. I'm not going to move a motion to change the terms. I really wanted to highlight that that's a big issue. It's a big barrier, given the numbers of people that they hire and the work that they do and the high level engagement that they have, and especially the different ways that the pandemic has affected different areas in our community and different people in our community. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I'm happy to also continue to work alongside your office to make sure that we're responding to these needs.
Okay, I think I heard you moving the recommendation, Councillor Kaibaga, is that right?
I will move the recommendation.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Yeah. Councillor Lewis, okay, wonderful. Any further discussion on the recommendation for the resting spaces? No, I just want to repeat that it's wonderful to see these moving ahead. Hopefully they can get up and running very soon. Okay, we're gonna open up the vote on that.
Counselor Salee,
I voted yes.
closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so we've parked 2.2 for a while. That brings us to 4.1, which is a request for delegation status from Ana Maria Velastro. I'll just look to see if there's anyone who wants to move that we hear the delegation either now or at a future meeting. Councillor
Happy to
Salee?
move the motion. Yep, happy to move the motion and for her to speak to us now.
Okay, seconder for that? Councillor Kaibaga? Okay, I think that Ms. Velastro is going to be calling in. So let's just make sure she's on the line. We're going to have a vote delegation.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so just before you begin, Ms. Velastro, I see that you're there on the call. I did want to clarify something I saw in your letter, and there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding, which is that the fees that are paid by people who are using Honk Mobile, those go directly to Honk Mobile. They're not fees that are collected by the city. It's not revenue that goes to the city. And in fact, during the free parking, the city is covering those fees on behalf of the people who are parking. So the fees are actually going to Honk Mobile and not to the city. I just wanted to clarify that. There's certainly no revenue going to the city that way. Okay, go ahead with your delegation. You've got 5 minutes.
Am I on now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to shut my computer off here because I'm hearing it online. So I was encouraged to come and talk to this committee because I had an incident where I was charged for parking a couple weeks ago. I heard on the radio that free parking had been extended, and I ended up getting a ticket because I didn't realize it was only extended for people who use Honk Mobile, which I don't. So I looked into it further, and I had a conversation with the budget office, and they explained to me that they had extended the 2-hour free parking for the downtown core, in part to support local businesses, and in part just as a safety measure, sort of to reduce contact with public services because of COVID-19. And since I'm not a Honk Mobile user, I felt quite frustrated that I wasn't fully informed, through all the avenues that information is distributed publicly, and I had a ticket. And I also felt it was somewhat unfair because those safety measures that the budget office considered weren't applicable to me. And I also feel I don't understand the entire relationship. Some of us read the terms and conditions of Honk Mobile, where you use an app and in exchange, my understanding is the relationship somehow as the city steers residents to Honk Mobile, they get special parking. There's special parking agreements for events and so on in exchange for the use of their private information. And I just feel it creates a monopoly for parking. And I see parking as sort of a basic service, and I feel it's I don't know if it's a discriminatory issue per se, but certainly when it comes to safety issues, I would see it as being very unfair. And I feel like parking is a basic service, and whatever the scheme is between the city and Honk Mobile, which I don't fully understand, I feel like it shuts people out when I consider it to be very unfair. My understanding is that other people have come forward and complained about Honk Mobile and about being shut out of certain areas in the core when they come with a car looking for parking because they don't subscribe to Haunt Mobile. They're shut out of certain sections of the downtown for parking. And I don't know if I have any more to say about that, but I think people need to understand better what the relationship is between the city and Haunt Mobile, how their personal information is being used. The terms of reference, it says they can access information on your phone. I don't think people understand that. Maybe some people do if they're big app users. But I know I didn't know that. I'm not a big app user. I think there needs to be transparency, and I think people should have choices on how they, how they use these services. And right now, people are being shut out, and I'm being ticketed, and I don't get the full goodwill gesture of safety measures because I don't subscribe to an app. And I guess that because you've had other complaints, I just think, somehow somebody should talk about this, or at least talk publicly about the relationship between Haunt Mobile and the city, and how that money relationship works. Because right now we're being, I can't park. I live downtown. I drive downtown. I have an injury as of the last year and a half, so I drive more than I would normally would. And so I can't always park where it would be convenient for me to park. That's it. Thank you for agreeing to hear me.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Belastro. I'm going to go to Mr. Katolik if you just wanted to clarify a couple of things that came up there. For example, if people don't use an app, how can they take advantage of the free parking that's offered in the core? If you want to clarify anything beyond what I already said about the relationship between Haunt Mobile and the city, certainly it might help to send the report where we dealt with this a couple of years ago to Ms. Velastro if she doesn't already have it. But Mr. Katolik, is there anything you wanted to just clarify in terms of how things are working right now?
Yes, to date, 25,000 users have utilized the Honk app for parking in the downtown area. And the Honk app was before the Community and Protective Services Committee back in 2016. It was fully publicly vetted, transparency was recognized, and we have a agreement with Honk that was fully vetted through our legal department. Of the 25,000 users that have used Honk, there's been around $90,000 that has been applied from our budget, which was approved through the Core Area Action Plan for 2-hour free parking for on-street parking and within our municipal parking lots. To date, I'm aware of 2 complaints for the use of the app. So you can apply for free parking through your cell phone, through your home computer, through a library computer. And now, in response to these 2 complaints, you can call our parking office via your landline and register for 2 hours free parking within a municipal lot or for on-street parking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaloik. So there is an option for people. They just need to call the parking office and give you their license plate, and then they could have 2 hours free parking. And that's an option that's available.
What about the other areas where they only offer Haunt Mobile?
Ms. Velastro, your delegation is open now, so you're going to have to not interrupt the meeting.
Okay.
We'll get Mr. Katolik to clarify. You did say that there are places where you can't park unless you're using Honk Mobile, and I do think it's important that Mr. Katolik clarify that.
Okay.
Yes, through the chair, you can contact our parking office during business hours and indicate that you will apply for free 2-hour parking within a municipal parking lot or on street. You will, however, have to supply your license plate number.
And Mr. Katolik, are there any areas where you can only park in a municipal parking spot if you're using Honk Mobile? You can't park there and pay, or you can't call and give your license plate?
Through the chair, that is correct. You could still apply for free parking via our master meters, which are both on street and in municipal parking lots, through credit cards, and also through cash.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have a motion, colleagues, to receive the delegation? Councillor Salee, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, I did want to speak.
Okay, I'll get a seconder and then I'll come back to you. I think Councillor Kaibaga, great. Councillor Salee, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Mrs. Velastro and also the resident. There was a Ward 3 resident who had raised this to me some time ago. So I am satisfied with the response from staff that we've been able to address the gap. I think I do appreciate where the residents were coming from and indicating to us, bringing that concern forward. So I'm satisfied with the fact that now there's a landline option which allows every person to have, an equal opportunity to participate in the 2-hour free parking. So I guess, I want to thank staff for that response and making that adjustment, but also thank the residents for coming forward today and in the past for raising the concern. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, we're going to open that motion up for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that brings us to item 4.2, colleagues, which is a letter from the chair of the Eldon House Board of Directors. I think the most appropriate thing to do is to refer this to the clerk. If there's required bylaw amendments, they can come forward to us at a future meeting. I believe the clerk has a motion prepared to that effect if someone's interested in moving that. Councillor Lewis, is there a seconder? The mayor. Any discussion? Councillor Salee, is that your hand up again?
My bad. No.
Okay, we'll just wait for that to come up on the screen. Everyone can see that motion is just asking the clerk to report back with any bylaw changes. Okay, we're going to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, I think maybe we should deal with 2.2 now, just to get whatever questions there are about this report out on the floor, and then we can go into closed session if that's necessary, as Councillor Lewis has suggested it might be. So this is the report about the East Lyons construction update. As mentioned in the report, obviously there's a lot of frustration out there in the community about the delays with this project. I know Councillor Lewis has been all over it. I'm just going to go to him if he has anything he wants to say on this item, and I'll look for other speakers. Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I first want to extend to staff my thanks for recognizing in this report, in writing, the community's frustration. I think it's really important to do that. We're now closing in on 3 years. Well, we have passed the 3-year mark since the ground was broken on this project. And we've seen other projects certainly start and end in that interim. So it's really frustrating to residents who see the construction site every day and don't see a lot of progress being made on the building itself in recent months. And I know that they have worked incredibly hard, our staff have, to sort this situation out. It has not been easy. There have been contract issues, there have been legal concerns, there have been scheduling issues, and I recognize that when a project of this scale encounters some problems, that it can be really difficult to get it back on track in a timely manner. So I want to particularly thank Mr. Wellhauser and Mr. Stafford and Ms. Smith, who have been nothing but patient and forthcoming with all of my emails and phone calls inquiring what's going on there. And I know that we can't put a date on this yet as much as we'd love to, But there is one concern that I think needs to be addressed in this report today. And I think that it's something that we can probably discuss in public session, but I did suggest that we put this to the end just in case we needed to disconnect the live stream. I know that creates a lot of extra work for our staff. And it comes around the fronting of these extra costs to maintain the architectural consultant on this project. With construction underway, I'm hoping staff can provide some indication as why it's important for the architectural consultant to remain with us on this to the end. And in terms of ensuring that the taxpayer is protected from cost overruns, how we will seek to mediate these costs moving forward so that, you know, certainly this delay is not the fault of London taxpayers, and how this extra cost might be recouped in the future to take the burden off of them.
So I had two questions there. One was about, you know, why do we have to keep the architectural consultant going, and the sort of issue around paying now to increase that. And then second, sort of, how are we going to recover the costs, right? Two separate questions there. So who wants to handle those?
Through the chair, thank you for those questions. I will ask Mr. Wellhauser to confirm the answer to those questions. Thank you.
Mr. Wellhauser, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. The consultant who has been with us since day one in this project has been working in good faith since the summer of 2019, essentially, and when their contract expired, when the original contract was supposed to be completed. There was an agreement with the consultant to carry on, and then we were going to reconcile those costs hopefully at some point in 2020. However, we ran into some further delays, and we are in front of you today seeking those additional fees to carry on the work. The reason we still need the consultant on board, and it's just not the architect, it's actually the full team of consultants, which is mechanical, electrical, structural, civil, and there's also some other specialty consultants involved in the job. They are required under the Ontario Building Code to continue to oversee the work. There is obligations through the building code where they have to sign off their design, so they have to take this all the way through completion. And then the final question around the additional cost, through the takeover agreement that was signed with Zurich Insurance, there is a option there to recover these expenses. And maybe I can pass that over to our legal folks to maybe just expand a bit more on that to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. Thank you.
Is it going to be Mr. Popovich who's going to handle that?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
Through the chair. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak at great length about it, but through the takeover agreement and takeover and completion agreement with Zurich, as you may recall, each of the parties to the agreement set aside and reserved their rights with regard to these ongoing costs, but it was contemplated that we would front them and then try to resolve the matter after the fact. Like after the fact being after the project was completed.
Got it. Councillor Lewis.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those answers. I think it's really important that it's on the public record. I mean, the construction has been going on for quite a long time now, so understandably, people are wondering why do we need to keep the consultants on, and I think understanding that they need to sign off on this work before the building is officially complete. They need to sign off on their designs and the safety aspects and everything else. That's why they need to be kept on. And hearing that, you know, there is an agreement in place to mediate the costs with the insurer after the project's over, I think that's an important piece too. So I wanted, and I'm glad we didn't have to go in camera to hear that. I wanted to make it really clear to folks both in Ward 2 and across the city who are looking forward to this opening that yes, there is an upfront cost here, but it is about getting the building done. And then when that is done, we will sort out the bills due with the insurer at that point. So thank you to our staff for answering that. And those are the questions that I had on this.
Thank you. I'll just look to committee to see if there's any other discussion. Okay, I don't see any. One thing I will say just from the chair is it's good to see that there's a interim source of financing from another project where there's a little bit of extra room in the capital budget to at least cover it in the meantime. I think it's a good example of how diligent everyone is with the capital budgets. And I think it's a good transfer to have it come from a little surplus in the Boswick project to help cover this issue, at least for the next little while we can get the project completed. So it's very well done on the financing side as well. Any further discussion? If not, I'm going to open up the vote. I think I need a mover first. Councillor Lewis, seconder. Councillor Hillier. Yeah.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that brings us to a letter from myself. I think what I'll do is I'm just going to introduce it briefly, and then I'm going to try and chair a discussion on it. And so I'm not going to move the chair, but if I do weigh into the discussion with any kind of enthusiasm, I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Hillier. So, colleagues, as I mentioned at our last meeting, I thought it was useful to have a discussion just about priorities, because I think we're all recognizing that we're in a pretty constrained environment, even more so than usual, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, and a lot of very important projects and files that come through our committee. So I just wanted to have a discussion as a committee about really where we have sort of common areas of focus, where we really want to make sure that we're executing well and that we're spending the majority of our time on the most important things, rather than dealing with all the things that will, of course, come at us and might be kind of interrupting our focus on other things. So we have a lot of really important areas to report into our committee. I know that they're all important, but I do think this particular year, having a discussion about where our focus should be. I don't think we necessarily have to have, motions or anything like that. We don't need to necessarily be putting this all down in writing, but I think even having a discussion would be helpful. So I'll just look to committee members to see if there's particular areas that you think over the next 12 months we really need to be focused on those things. I see the mayor, and then I'll look for other speakers. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Councillor Halmer, and thank you, by the way, for bringing this forward at our last meeting for us to consider. And I think it is appropriate sometimes we take stock and look at what our priorities are. So what I did was I reviewed the standing committee profiles, and they're kind of generally thin, but they're point form. So I guess they're specific, but there's nothing in terms of the I guess the broader thematic sense of intent. But the four primary areas that we have deal with animal services, community services, including housing, childcare, Ontario Works. The third bullet is parks, recreation, and neighborhood-related matters and public safety. That's what it says. So as I was looking at it, it seems to me, and I think we see a lot of that in the various reports back from staff, that with the focus of providing more affordable housing and accommodating the needs of our most vulnerable, I think that will always and should be our primary focus. And I know we've got animal services too, but in general, the other things in terms of community service and public safety really do relate to that in so many ways. I was going to mention to colleagues that we are going to be looking at some recommendations in an upcoming SPPC meeting from the London Community Recovery Network, and some of those recommendations that have come from various agencies and individuals who have participated quite extensively will relate, I think, to this committee. And I hope that as we look for the projects that we're going to undertake, that and the focus that we're giving back to staff to review and bring back to us, that some of those recommendations will come forward. I won't spoil our SPPC meeting by going into those details, but it strikes me that the things that are probably paramount in my mind do tie into issues around affordable housing and one of the most vulnerable, and paramount to that is our focus on that. So just a few observations, Chair.
Thanks, Mayor Holder. I'm going to go to Councillor Lewis, and let me know if you want to be on the speakers list. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm starting my third year on this committee, and it's actually my favorite committee, with all due respect to the other committees I've had a chance to serve on so far, because this committee deals with things that affect the quality of life of Londoners in a very direct way. When we talk about our parks and recreation services and things like neighborhood decision-making, those are really valuable enhancements to the quality of life in our community. There's also a piece in here around public safety, and some of these are on the deferred matters list, actually. When we look at our bylaws in terms of consumer protection and just general community protection, right? And we've got the tow truck operator license issue still outstanding. We've got the swimming pool fence bylaw still outstanding. We've got the regulation for short-term accommodations, or the Airbnb licensing issue to deal with. And I think those are really important from a consumer protection point of view, particularly as we work towards a recovery. You know, I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a time when people might be particularly vulnerable from an economic standpoint as well. So I think it's important that we don't lose sight of some of those things that we can do. And then we come to the housing, which obviously is the single biggest, in my mind at least, issue facing our community, how we tackle the affordable housing and homelessness issues. You know, we dealt with some of those on today's agenda. They will continue to come up, and I certainly hope that provincial and federal opportunities to get funding and do even more will come forward. But as we look at what's ahead of us this year, we know that we're going to be getting things to deal with through the COVID Recovery Network and through opportunities that may come up from senior levels of government. And then we've got these other things that are on our deferred matters list, which are around consumer protection and the ongoing, and this will be a COVID recovery thing as well, how our parks and recreation services are going to be able to operate and provide services to citizens in the year ahead. So to me, those are the really key things for us to be focused on. One of the things I'd really like to do this year is get more things taken off the deferred matters list, get them taken care of. You know, we were ultimately at the end of the day elected to make decisions, and we may not always get them right. And in fact, the chair has referred to this in terms of our COVID response earlier this year. Sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to do something, and then you can adjust on the way after the fact. So I hope that we can tackle some of those this year. And I will finish by saying, as a mea culpa, I've certainly put a couple of things on here. I hope we're also sensitive to staff's time this year and know that even some of the reports where we have, Q1 report dates for next year or Q2 report dates for next year, COVID may mean those are delayed a bit, and to be understanding and respectful of their time and not pile up report after report after report on them, but really focus on our core efforts. And as I said, I've certainly asked for reports back as well, so I'm hardly the poster child to say I've never asked for those. But I hope we can keep that in mind this year as we look to move forward through this recovery phase.
Any other committee members? No? Okay. If not, I just wanted to flag a couple of things. So I definitely am hearing, and I've heard it in many meetings from colleagues, certainly focus on housing and housing-related matters. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed, and most of them come through the committee. More recently, we've been dealing with some of them at SPPC because they're through the Community Housing Corporation, or they're through the HDC. But I mean, usually they come through this committee, and I think that's going to be a key priority over the next year. I do want to flag two things that are underway this year that they're not normal items, and I think we'll have to deal with them. One is the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, which got underway a long time ago, but has been delayed, like many things, through the pandemic, and will be coming back sometime in 2021, probably in the fall. And, that is a pretty large undertaking, reorienting how we're thinking about community safety and well-being, although it's something that's came through the modernization of the Police Services Act. It's something that's led by the municipality. And I think that it's going to be a key focus for us here at this committee. The other one is the Fire Master Plan, which doesn't happen every year and is underway now. And especially in terms of the long-term direction for that service area, that's a major undertaking that we'll be dealing with. So I certainly think that it was helpful to have a brief discussion about those things. I think the suggestion from Councillor Lewis, which is to be selective in the items that we're bringing forward as new initiatives, probably a good idea, because I think focusing on executing and getting these things done will help us meet all those timelines. And obviously there's going to be things that come up that require us to take action. You know, it's not like we're not going to deal with any new initiatives, but I do think we have to kind of bear down and focus on the things that are in front of us right now. Any other comments from colleagues? If not, perhaps we can just have a motion to receive that letter. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Kaibaga. Thank you. Okay, we'll get that up.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that brings us to the deferred matters additional business. We put this one over to this meeting so we could have some time to look over and identify items where perhaps we can just stop working on those things and just drop them. And so what I'd like to do is just see if colleagues have items they think are in that category where, you know, we don't need to have any further work done on those items and we don't need to necessarily have a report back on them. If there's no objection to that, you know, if everyone is sort of in agreement that we could probably drop it, then I think we can have a motion to just drop those things. If somebody's really quite keen to have a report back on them, I don't want to turn this part of the meeting into a very long discussion about the merits of these items. If somebody really wants a report back, I think we probably just leave it on there. So I'll look to colleagues to see if you've got some items. I see Councillor Lewis. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if we really need to continue to ask staff for reports on item number 2, the municipal implementation of legalized cannabis, the Cannabis License Act of 2018. Folks, we all know that this is really driven by federal and provincial regulations, federal in terms of what's allowed, and then provincial in terms of licensing and where it can be sold. Our part in this is very, very small. And when we talk about impacts associated with recreational cannabis, I'm not sure that our staff are really in a position to provide a report back on the socioeconomic impacts of legalizing cannabis. You know, we're 2 years into this situation. I just think that asking them to do another report back is just, you know, really putting unnecessary work on their plate, because we're not really going to have much of a say over how this continues to roll out across the city.
Okay, anyone object to dropping that one? I don't see any objections. Okay, any other ideas? Councillor Hillier.
Yes, thank you. On the vacant buildings bylaw number 8, reason being is until after COVID is over and we see an actual landscape of what downtown looks like, I'm not sure we should be implementing associated fees and proactive enforcement protocol. I don't think this is the appropriate time for this.
What do colleagues think about that? Councillor Kaibaga.
I absolutely disagree, given that vacancy in the core area action plan was one of the things that were identified as issues that contribute to the downtown's deterioration. So I do not believe that this should be removed. I think that we can, through the recovery network and moving forward and figuring out ways to recover from not just COVID, but also constructions, we should keep vacancy rates as a priority of things that we want to ensure that we're going to deal with, whether it be figuring out a way to support people to make sure that there is less vacancy, or whether it be ways to enforce to reduce the vacancy in the core. It is crucial, and we cannot remove that.
Okay, so I said if there was substantial opposition, we would just leave it. So I think we'll just leave that one. Any other ideas? Mayor Holder, go ahead.
Thank you. On item 14, Chair, Jones Place, I was requested to advocate for the capital campaign for YOU. I've circled back to my staff. I believe that was done, but I will undertake to ensure that that was, but from my perspective, I'm quite certain that we had, following the council meeting, had done exactly that. So I'm suggesting that that can now be removed comfortably.
Okay, well, why don't we identify that one to be taken off, and then if there's some different information between now and the council meeting, we can deal with it then. Okay, anything else? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder through you if I could ask Mr. Stafford on item number 13, the Holy Roller Tank Memorial. I know that we did approve a motion through council. I believe that's been communicated to the commanding officer of the 1st Hussars. I know they've initiated their fundraising campaign. We had requested a report back to a future meeting of the Community Protective Services Committee with a recommendation for other partnership measures that could be undertaken. But I'm not sure what the status of that is, or if, you know, and I do want to ask Mr. Stafford, is it necessary at this time to leave this on in his view, or is this something where we can take some action in the future if it needs to be taken, but understanding that a private organization is now leading this, I'm not sure that we need to sit and wait for a report back and leave this on the deferred matters list for, you know, perhaps a year or two. This might be something that we can just reintroduce if necessary.
Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, I think that's probably correct. They have started their campaign. There's one item on the report back around the donations that we would have to stay out of. That would be something that they would do privately. So that part would be there. And then some of the other partnerships that we talk about as far as supporting, you know, the return and beautification efforts and those types of things, we'll undertake those with the group anyway. And we could either, you know, keep you informed or report back at a later date. But I do agree that this could come off at this time. It's well underway.
Okay, any objections to that, colleagues? No, okay, so we'll take that one.
Sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. No objections at all. I just did want to advise the committee that as part of the promotion for the Holy Roller Tank Memorial, I was requested to prepare and do a video. I was at my photogenic best, I promise, to ask Londoners and all interested individuals who might be interested in this, because this can certainly go beyond London, to support it, and that was done as well. So that's just a point of reference back to the committee.
Okay, thank you. One that I had identified was one that's been on there for quite some time. Number 1, the Salvation Army commissioning, and I know that came forward, I believe, from a member of the community who was looking for a way to recognize the Salvation Army, but I'm not sure that Victoria Park is really the right place to have that happen in the first place. And I frankly haven't heard from the Salvation Army that it's something that they're interested in. So I just wonder if we could drop that. Any objections to that? No, okay. So perhaps we can have a motion then to just, I don't see any other ideas, but we can clean those up, take those off, and focus on the things that are remaining. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Lewis, seconder. Councillor Kaibaga. Any discussion on that? No? We'll open up the vote. I think the clerk tracked all the things we were changing. Okay, thank you for keeping up.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Any additional business, colleagues? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Lewis, Councillor Kaibaga. Let's do a hand vote on that one. Councillor Salee. Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much.